Support for the Dice Tower comes from listeners like you, and from The Op, also known as USAopoly, and from GameNerds.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 742.
2021 in review.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Geoff joins us to present a live GameTek segment, and he and I discuss our adventures at PAX Unplugged. We tackle some of our recent play sessions and finish the show with an examination of the year that was 2021. I'm Eric Summerer, and joining me now, the Professor Utonium and Mojo Jojo of board gaming, Tom Vassell and Geoff Engelstein.
Man, I was hoping after several hundred episodes we would get away from this.
We were away for a long time. Now, have you guessed which one is which is really the key? One of the other two of you is known for teaching college-level classes because Mr. Engelstein is with us for this episode. So that leaves...
Mojo Jojo.
Exactly.
Thank you. And so, Eric, ruining the surprise, even though it's probably...
It wasn't a surprise. I just said it in the intro.
It's in the show notes, too. Geoff Engelstein, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
I should clarify something, folks. For those of you listening, this is Geoff. It's Geoff. I get many emails sometimes. People say, I really like Geoff. I'm thinking, who's Geoff? When I read the email.
I have to think Geoff actually gets more of those emails than you do, Tom.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just
between Geoff and Engelstein, my name has been spelled many incorrect ways. I just brush it off at this point.
Didn't we have it wrong on our website for a long time, the last name? Or I was putting it wrong in the show notes or something. It was Eric, I think.
It wasn't me. Geoff, how long have you been on the show? I think, when was the first GameTek segment?
It was in 2007 was the first GameTek.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you predate me on the Dice Tower, although I did your intro, if I'm not mistaken.
You did the later intro. I think it was a different intro first.
Was there an early intro?
Yeah, and then later it got the better intro that you gave it.
That's just the music.
So thank you for that. But yeah, it's been 15 years now, so long time.
Wow. So as we continue begin our countdown to the end here, I thought it fitting that we have Geoff come on live on the show. And just a good time to catch up and everything. One of my most memorable moments, I don't know if you remember, Geoff, when you were 49, I believe, at Gen Con, you did a segment about square numbers. I'm assuming it was 49. It couldn't have been 25.
Yes, it was 49. Yeah, I do remember that one well.
That was in the one where if people sat in the wrong part of the room, they couldn't see you because of the pillars.
There was a pillar in the middle of the room, yes.
Well, that was back when you were it was done in the tiny little, side rooms of Gen Con, but now the Dice Tower live events are in the giant 2,000 person ballroom. So, yes, how far it has come.
Way there.
Although our crowd this year was about the same as some of our earlier ones, but that's just because of everything that's been going on. But anyway, yes. So Geoff, I don't remember what brought you to the show initially. You told me you were like, hey, I would like to class up the joint, I believe is the way you first asked to come on.
Sounds like Geoff.
Yeah, that's not exactly it. But yeah, sure, we can go with that story.
So anyway, we're really glad to have you here. And folks, this is the final episode of 2021, I believe. I don't know, am I doing my math wrong again? No, this is the final episode of 2021.
This will be, Mandy and Suzanne will kick off the new year next week.
That's right, and that's why this is called 2021 in Review. And what a year. This year has gone by tremendously fast, I felt. And maybe that might be compared to the fact the year 2020 was about 200 months long, it felt. So maybe that's why this one's moving faster. But yeah, and one of the things about 2021 is we get to play more games. Before we jump into some games, I did want to mention, folks, I'm not always the clearest of persons. I find this out every time we make any sort of announcement on our show. So let me be really clear. We are planning to do audio stuff in the future, and I'll be really clear on that in one regards. In 2 weeks from today, our Kickstarter is launching for the Dice Tower in 2022. And one of the things I'm pushing in that is we're going to be, Wendy Yee is going to be working full-time at transferring a lot of our good YouTube videos to the audio podcast. We've been kind of sporadic about that, but she's going to be doing that full-time. And Eric and I are working on something which we'll give more details about in the future, audio. So I'm not throwing audio away. I think audio is important to have around, especially if you're not able to, sit down and have YouTube playing. So there'll still be audio stuff. We'll announce that hopefully before the end and give you more exacting details. Also, if you've never listened to Dice Tower Now, that podcast has surpassed us number-wise.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because they're doing multiple episodes a week, right?
Well, whatever our excuses is, yes. But Corey has done a fantastic job on that. So, subscribe to Dice Tower Now. And, of course, all the other wonderful podcasts on the Dice Tower network. There are many great podcasts. I'll still maintain the network so that you can find great stuff to listen to.
Sure. Ludology is still out there.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Ludology is one of those. That's one of the podcasts that has kind of morphed and molded its way. Produced a board game that is in the Dice Tower library.
Mm-hmm.
And you still do Ludology segments somehow, Geoff? People were asking about that.
Yeah, I do. Well, the GameTek segments from this podcast do eventually show up there about 18 months later. So if you're looking for just that snippet of it, and you don't want to, try to find the Dice Tower that it was in, then you can always go to Ludology. But periodically, I as of episode 200, I stepped away. But I still come back occasionally and do special event podcasts or different types of interviews with people that I get that need more than like just a little 5-minute segment for GameTek. I'll do that over on that feed. So I am still not rid of me completely, but certainly after doing 200 episodes and kind of getting burned out myself, I understand where you're coming from after 750 to want to kind of mix things up a little bit and get a little bit of a change of format and a change of pace. So I understand that.
So there's a lot of board games that we've been playing lately. And so, Geoff, why don't you lead us off with the Stefan Feld game? I'm kidding. I know it's Knizia.
It's not really.
I know it's
You made me quickly go to working. I thought it was Knizia. So, yes, I was able to go to the PAX Unplugged convention for a day in a couple weeks ago down in Philadelphia. And one of the games I got to play there with one Mr. Stephen Bonacore, he was raving about this new Knizia game, Witchstone. It was like the only game that he had purchased. And so we took it out and gave it a whirl. And I really enjoyed it. It definitely feels way more like a Feld than a Knizia. You are 100% right. There's all these different things you can do to get points, and they all intersect in interesting ways. So I definitely enjoyed it. I think in one sense, it's kind of... And the two games I'm going to talk about are kind of contrasting in this way. But this one, I don't feel like there's anything new, super new and innovative here. I think, though, what it does, and there's been so many games that kind of do this recently, which has been nice, is that it just takes existing elements a little bit from here, a little bit from there, different mechanisms, different ideas, and just kind of remixes them into a very, pleasant, fun, dynamic experience. And I think that Witchstone falls into that. There's a lot of different things going on, a lot of different interlocking things. Nothing that's going to knock your socks off and say, wow, but it's just, it's just a really, really nice game. And, I always like talking about movies and their relation to games. And this one felt for me like, if I go to see a rom-com, I don't need to see a rom-com that's, breaking new ground or be inventive or the art nouveau of rom-coms, right? I just want a rom-com that just hits the notes and is very pleasant and has witty banter. And I feel that's, that Witchstone is like that. Runes of Arnak is kind of like that. There's just a lot of really nice games that like that now that not super innovative, but they don't have to be. I think that's just a great sign of maturity and strength of the industry and the products now.
I don't disagree.
And I won, by the way, Stephen, if you're listening. Handily.
So first up for me today is a solo game from Scott Alms. It's called Warp's Edge. A friend of mine let me borrow his copy. Said, I really enjoyed this game that came out last year in 2020. And I think it sort of flew under the radar. People haven't seen it, and I'd like to let you give it a try. And Warp's Edge is it's thematically similar to the battle at Kemble's Cascade, which came out several years ago. It's a defeat the spaceships and defeat the boss spaceship sort of thing. You choose a ship at the beginning that has a certain amount of hull and shields and access to special powers, and you choose a boss that's going to be the ultimate enemy for the end of the game, and then you stack the deck with different levels of enemies. You start out with very simple ones, you'll eventually get to the more complicated ones. And you also have a certain number of replays that you have to defeat the boss. If you manage to do so within that certain number of resets, they call them warps, then you win. But if you fail to defeat the boss, or if you run out of hull in your ship, you will fail. The mechanism of the game is that it's a bag building game. You have tokens. You start out with like 10 basic tokens. Some of them are weapons. You have maneuvers. You've got energy tokens. And you will pull 5 of them from your bag on your turn and assign them to enemies. Each enemy has sort of a maneuver value and an attack value, and as long as you assign something to each enemy, that enemy will not attack on that turn. But if you manage to defeat them with enough maneuver or enough strength, you will get some sort of reward, which usually includes more chips. There's a whole market of chips that you will get. And in fact, your particular ship has special chips that you can access. You don't get them at the beginning, but you can buy them with the energy that you've got. So you are adding chips to your bag, and every time you defeat somebody and get a reward, those chips go into your bag. But whenever you run out of chips, if you're trying to pull your 5 at the beginning of your turn and you can't do so, that warp is over, and you basically reset everything, and all the enemies get shuffled together, so now you might have medium and difficult and easy enemies all mixed together, back in the stack, and you reset, and you start over. So you're gradually getting stronger, and your stamina basically increases, and you eventually try and take down the boss and manage to survive. It's a neat little game. There's a lot of options. There are, even without the expansion, just the base game has, I think, 4 or 6 different ships and I think 4 bosses. There's a lot of combinations and possibilities, and then there's an expansion that adds a whole bunch more options as well. I like the chip building, the bag building aspect, the different powers. There's a lot of looking up of powers the first time you play a particular grouping of them. But I like the flow. The turns seem to go quickly, but it's thinky, trying to figure out that puzzle of how to make that particular ship and boss combination work, and the luck of the draw of what you pull out of the bag at any given moment. Warp's Edge is pretty neat, and I'm going to have to give back this copy at some point, but it's going on my wish list.
My only concern with this game is it seems to be ranked very highly on Board Game Geek. It looks very generic space.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of specific theme. There's an alien-looking bad guy. That's about it. Yeah, that doesn't bother me. I'm perfectly happy to let the mechanics sing on this one.
All right, I want to talk about a 2-player game from Roxley. Just was delivered as a Kickstarter game, Radlands. This is a post-apocalyptic thing where you're fighting post-apocalyptic people over water, I think. Because it's always water. In fact, water is the resource in this game, but it's best to think of it as action points. You have a certain number of water to spend on your turn. You start with 3 camps. There's like a little deck of camps. You draft these. You draw 6. You pick 3 to keep. These camps give you your special abilities over the course of the game and also determine your starting hand draw from another deck. And in that deck, you're going to have just these different people that are going to be thrown out on the table or events. And when you play an event, it will tell you what row to play it in, 3, 2, or 1. And each turn an event will move forward 1 and go off. And each player has an event that can be played that basically shoots at one of your opponent's camps. So this game is similar. Geoff, I don't know, is there a term for the CCGs that have rows in them? There's several games that have done this, that have Like your guys are in rows going up against the people across from them?
No, not a specific term that I'm aware of, no. Like battle line and things like that.
You're like the mechanism guy.
I know. So now I've got another one to add to the list. Okay, there we go. It's on the list now.
So the cards are in like a formation, basically.
They are.
They
So
attack the people opposite them.
Yeah, you have three camps, and then you have these people that you put in front, and you can't attack something unless you hit the person in front of them. And you can even like have a card played down. There's many times you could play a generic card. Any card could be played face down by certain abilities. And it's like, I forget what they call them, punks or something like that. And they die after like one hit, but they're there just to keep your camps from being destroyed. Camps take 2 hits to be killed, and then it's all about how do you play your cards. You have this amount of water you can play each turn. You can also discard a card to get an action. Each card has a little icon in the corner that gives you an action. You're definitely going to be referring to your little sheet that tells you what all the icons do as the game goes by, but it's pretty fast. We're talking 15-minute games, and I like it. It gives me that battle line feel, but it's going to be different every game. There's certainly luck of the draw, but there's a lot of countering, and and when you first pick those 3 camps, what are you going to do? In one game I picked 3 healing camps. I'm like, whatever they do, I'm going to heal it. And my opponent picked a camp that was essentially like one of those cities that's in that Peter Jackson movie where cities eat other cities. I forget what it's called. It's a very forgettable movie, but these giant cities drive around and eat other cities. He had one of these things that just came and smashed my stuff and completely destroyed it. No healing allowed. And I thought, well, that would have been good to have known. But again, it's so fast and fun. This is one of the few games in existence that I would say I feel like you need the player mat. It's really close because you have this little grid in front of you that's invisible. If you buy the deluxe version, you get a player mat. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but invisible grids are not my friends.
Okay.
So, but other than that, really enjoy the game. That's Radlands. And yes, technically you can play, I guess, with multiple players if you add multiple sets, whatever. 2 players. It's a 2-player game.
Yeah. Okay, so my second game is... I believe it's just been released in English in the U.S. I think there was an earlier version, but it's Picture Perfect from Arcane Wonders, I believe in the U.S., and Anthony Nouveau's the designer. And in this game, this is right. I talked the last game about how it didn't do anything too much different, but did it really well. But Picture Perfect definitely tries to do something different. And the gimmick here is that you're a photographer at a dinner party, and you've got all these little character standees that are standing around a banquet table. And there's also, bottles of wine and plates and all different things on the table itself. And each person has a little envelope with cards in it that says, who they want to stand next to, or if maybe they don't want this person's face to be seen, or they want to be in the front row, or they want to be in the back row, or whatever. And you have to arrange the people in such a way that they meet as many of their requirements as they want. And then the kind of neat part is at the very end of the game, to resolve it, is you actually take out your phone and take a picture of the guests, and you can kind of take a different angle and make sure that the people are obscured, have their faces obscured, who they want obscured, or whatever. And it's a lot of fun. I've actually played it twice. I really thought my wife would like it, and I was pleasantly surprised that, I guess, maybe not as surprised, but she did enjoy it. I guess a little pleasantly surprised because it's very much a memory game. What you do is you have to look at these little envelopes and then put those cards back in and kind of remember where all the people are. But she actually requested to play it the next day again. And just, the fun factor of having a little standees, and you can make up the stories about why they don't want to stand next to certain people. In both of the games I played, the plant gets its own little envelope, this giant fern, and it was very demanding, the plant, more than any of the other characters. And just to have that, fun moment of taking the picture that you kind of have as a little keepsake for the game. There's a couple of, I want to try the advanced variant. The basic one, sometimes there's just, you get a little hosed on which envelopes you see or can't see or something. But, if you treat it as sort of a light game and don't get too hung up on it, knowing that there's no perfect solution to the puzzle of what's in all those envelopes, it's a lot of fun. So that's Picture Perfect.
Yeah, I really like this one. And yes, the advanced version is better just because there's a little less luck involved, I think.
I'm planning to play this with the family. They're coming over for a family game day after Christmas, and this is on the docket for sure. But I think we're definitely going to start with the basic version. I think because it's a bidding sort of thing that you're doing to get the advanced thing moving, and I'm not sure that I think that's going to be too much for them approaching the game with the bidding.
Yeah, I would agree. Whenever you have an auction, there's the question of the value of something because, you bid with the stuff on your table and it's worth points at the end of the game. So it's like, well, how many points is it worth to be able to see the child's envelope and versus not? And that's just tough for new players to judge. So I would definitely recommend sticking with the basic version.
So next for me is called Living Forest. The designer here is Aska Christensen, and it's got art from Apolline Etienne. That's just a fun name to say. The publisher is Ludonaut. This one I got to play at PAX in their first look section. In Living Forest, there is an evil forest spirit who is trying to set the forest ablaze, and you are trying to prevent that from happening. By creating a team of forest guardians. Those forest guardians are represented by cards, and they have varying symbols on them that will allow you to put out the fires, to acquire tiles for your little forest board, acquire more cards to go into your deck, all sorts of cool stuff. It has a similar mechanism to Mystic Vale. You have your deck, and you will flip cards up from the deck, and you may continue to do so, but you are looking for these dark moon symbols that represent solitary creatures in your deck. And if you get a third one showing in your tableau as you continue to draw cards, then you have busted for the round, and you will only get to take one action instead of two actions in the next phase of the game. But if you manage to stop before then, there's also white moon symbols that counteract the black moon, the dark moon symbols. So you continue to draw cards until you either decide to stop or you bust, and then you can take actions by putting out fires, using basically the symbols that you've revealed to do cool things. Drafting cards, drafting tiles, putting out fires, moving along a little track that if you leapfrog other players, you can steal some of their stuff, which can help them keep them away from victory, because there's 3 ways to win the game. You can either put out 12 fire tokens, you can plant 12 trees, different trees on your forest board, or the third one that I am now blanking on, it's another 12 of something, and that's the third victory condition. And having to keep track of all of those is part of the key to this. As you're building your deck and doing all these things on your own personal board, you have to watch what the other players are doing, because somebody, while you're working on one thing and maybe well ahead making progress on, say, planting trees, somebody else is putting out fires and doing a great job of it, and you have to watch what they're up to. After everybody takes their actions, then the evil spirit attacks, and if you haven't done a good job putting out fires, the fire is actually going to attack the players and do damage to you and add cards to your deck that you don't want, which takes effort to get rid of. It's, as Geoff said, not something that is terribly new and innovative, but it seems to work. I felt like the Mystic Vale sort of push your luck thing is stuff I've seen before, but I did like that multiple victory condition, having to keep multiple plates spinning and not let a particular aspect fall by the wayside while you focus on something else. So I did enjoy. I really liked the play, and it seemed to work well with Living Forest from Ludonaut.
Well, let's jump from the forest into the ocean, and we'll talk about Aqua Garden.
That would put out the fire.
Well, in this one, it's more. There's less nefarious things going on in this game. You're just basically making an aquarium. You want to have the best aquarium between all the players. This is from a small Japanese company. Designer is Tatsuka Chuo, and it has really gorgeous pieces. And I don't know. I have a Kickstarter version. I don't know if it's different or not, but it has really beautifully screen printed, colorful fish. And it's one of those games where there's a circular rondelle track in the middle with fish on it, and you can move your boss, who's the piece you move on that track, as far as you want, but you can never go back. And the person who's behind gets to go first, so you might have multiple turns in a row. And most of the time, you're taking fish and sticking those fish in one of your tanks, but each fish requires a certain amount of oxygen And there's a few other minor details, like sharks can't go with most fish because they tend to eat them. You can add algae to the tanks to add more oxygen to that. And then there's other spots you can stop besides getting fish, where you can advertise the different fish that are in your aquarium and get some more money. Money can be used to buy fish that you need, or algae or kelp. And usually, I think once you play your first base game, the game comes with a few special fish you can throw in, and there's like several expansions that add more. So you might have manta rays, and you might have, I don't know, all kinds of weird fish, even seals and polar bears in your aquarium. So it's pretty simple. The scoring itself is pretty simplistic, but you have kind of two rondels. You have the big one that you're moving around on the outside. You have one on your own player board. Your worker moves around, and you can only put fish in one of the two tanks that your worker ends up next to after you move them. It's light I wouldn't call it a light game. It's a medium game, but it's not difficult. The hardest thing is remembering how everything scores and such. But I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I mean, part of it's the visual thing. I love going to aquariums. If there's an aquarium and I can afford going to it, I'll go to it wherever I go because I think they're really neat. I just love seeing fish and sharks and manta rays and all that stuff. I just love it. And so that theme really does it for me. And this game looks gorgeous. But the idea of just moving around and picking up fish and, there's only one shark on the board, so I better move to get that shark before anyone else does. But I'm giving up several turns probably to do so. So it's a lot of fun. That's Aqua Garden.
I was confused about the scale of this for a while. When you said aquarium, I was thinking like in your den, like a small fish tank. And then you started talking about sharks and polar bears, and I didn't know how they would fit in the aquarium in your den. But you're talking about like SeaWorld.
Yes.
That sort of aquarium.
You don't have a shark aquarium in your new house, Eric? Is that what you're saying?
I don't. I have not.
I feel like you missed opportunity there.
I haven't installed
No,
it.
Eric is one step away. It's when he becomes that evil mastermind. That's when you get the shark or a piranha aquarium. It's one of those two.
Yeah. Well,
or a moat.
So you're just waiting for the kids to move out, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, yes, that will go in there.
Kids move out. Shark aquarium under the drop floor in your office. That's the first thing that's going
Piranha tank. Yes.
Alrighty, well, that's the games we played. Let's go to GameTek. Oh, wait, it's live.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for GameTek with Geoff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
So one of the real interesting concepts in playing games is the magic circle. And I've talked about that in a couple of different other GameTek segments. But for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the idea is that, when you start playing a game with somebody or doing a game-like activity, that the players in the game basically agree to a set of rules and agree that they're kind of in this new separate little reality bubble where these rules apply, and that you're all trying to, do this activity together. And it's something that's distinct from the real world. And there's a lot of implications of that. It was actually first introduced in the 1920s or 1930s by Huizinga in his excellent book, Homo Ludens, which for those of you that are looking for some pretty dense reading material might find interesting. But it's formed the basis of a lot of analysis of games over the years. And I just saw this article, it was a little while ago that this came to my attention, and I've kind of been sitting on it and waiting for the right opportunity to talk about it. And this seems like a good time as any.
Okay.
And the name of the article is Non-Lexical Moans, Response Cries in Board Game Interactions, from Emily Hofstetter, who is a professor of linguistics. See, I knew this would get some good interactive stuff. I'm not as good of a moaner. And actually, I went and looked at her work. She's actually done a lot of work with linguistics in board games, like how people indicate to each other, kind of non-verbally when it's time to take the next turn and different things. But in this paper, she records like 37 different games being played and analyzes the times when people moan or groan. And interestingly, what she discovers is that that moaning in this context, it's an indicator that you're unhappy. It's an indicator that something has happened that you're not pleased about. And yet it's still within the magic circle that you're still playfully upset about it, right? You're not really upset. And in fact, moaning, if you think about it, the type of moans that you hear around the game table and stuff like that, I'm sure, you guys just did some. So thank you for that demonstration. But, they still have that playful air to them, right? That this is a nonverbal way that we can indicate that we're unhappy, but still stay within that context of, I'm unhappy, but look, we're playing a game. It's fine. I expect that you're going to try to mess me up with your move or do something like that. And a lot of times it's also when people moan, it's with laughter, with humor and good-natured stuff. So just one example that she has here is she's got a bunch of different games. And interestingly, there's a reference to Board Game Geek. It's like the researchers may not be familiar with the games that I use in these examples. So here's a reference to Board Game Geek to use them. In one game here, there's somebody flips a card up, and it's a card that would have been perfect for another player if it had come up in the previous turn. And so it's Tina, and Tina moans, and then people automatically jump and interpret that as like, oh yeah, that's something funny that I can react to and start laughing. And Tina's like, oh, it would have been perfect for me last turn, and just is kind of exasperated. Or they have a game of Dutch Blitz where she recorded it, and the transcriptions are interesting. Unfortunately, there's no actual recordings of this, which I was trying to find for this segment. But in that same thing, where just all of a sudden, like, somebody calls out Blitz, which ends the round, right? It's one of these speed games, and that just ends things very quickly. And all the other players just like start moaning and groaning, but but it's immediately met with laughter. So I just thought that concept was fascinating. And I mean, you guys have been kind of reenacting some of them, but have you seen that? Do you kind of picture that in your mind now when you're thinking about games and the way that you react in terms of the vocalizations that you make that are game-like nonverbal vocalizations versus ones that are maybe in the outside world when you're like really upset at something?
Sure. Although as you were talking, I am thinking of the few times, and it's rare, but it does occasionally happen, that someone transitions out of that magic circle and they are genuinely upset about something. And that isn't always detected by the group at the table right away because they're all in a certain mindset. But if someone is so frustrated that they are no longer having fun, it sort of changes the feel at the table once everyone realizes that this person is no longer having fun.
Eric, you can do self-reflection later.
Okay.
No, you got so serious there. I was thinking more like when this happens. Like the time I notice this happening the most is when someone's like, and this happens a lot in games. It's not a bad thing. They're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know what? I'll put my worker here, or I'll do this. They pick a decent option. They're not really sure what to do. And the person who's going after them, that's exactly what they were going to do. And they always go, or some sort of, or just a really loud sigh, which I think would fit this category.
Yeah, another example is actually given from a game of Sushi Go, where they make a choice, and then as soon as they're handed the cards for the next round, there's a person that moans because the hand they got would have been much if they had known that these were the cards they're getting, were much better. But there's a couple of different lexical things that I think were interesting. One is that moans of this nature tend to be long. Most of them average clock in like around 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds, which is actually really long for a nonverbal kind of communication. Usually it's just like a huh or a grunt or an or something like that. But moans tend to be a little bit drawn out. And it's kind of distinctive from, like you were talking about, Eric, when people really get upset, that it tends to be sharper in tone. Moans are more like they're lower. It's like, come on. If somebody says something like that, right, that's you're going to take that a little bit more seriously, right? That's a sharper expression that's got those hard vowels, whereas the moans are kind of softer and longer and kind of imply that you're just playing at being angry in a way.
Do you think it's more like you're playing it up? You're basically doing an exaggerated reaction because we're all just sort of pretending to be upset.
Right. And for me, that's part of the fun. I like, if someone messes me up, and that's for me indicating back to them, so like, if somebody plays a move that really messes me up, I'm going to moan and groan about it, but I'm going to do it in a way that says, yeah, I recognize that was kind of a good move, but I'm not really upset about it. I understand that you're still in the context of the game rather than just, sitting quietly and stewing or whatever,
Right.
That you're actually helping things along and kind of maintaining the mood in a nonverbal way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe it's just the groups I play in. Like, I remember very specifically last week, I told someone I hated them both in the game and out of the game. But we all knew I was joking. And
Wait,
I was
you were
kind of like,
joking?
stop blocking me. Stop blocking me. It was just kind of, everyone's being silly
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and
There's a lot of, I mean, the trash talking, right?
yeah, and the tone in which you say it matters too with a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
I would argue that I found the more annoyed people get, usually the less sound and the less talking. It's when they're just sitting there super quiet. You're like, oh no.
Yeah, that's when you've crossed over.
Right. And I was kind of just recently we've been watching. This is a little off topic, but we've been watching the Beatles documentary on Disney about the recording sessions. And yeah, I mean George gets like super upset at one point, but he doesn't say anything up to it. Right. It's that same thing. He's just sitting there quietly, and all of a sudden it's like, maybe if you'd indicated in some fashion that you were upset. But yeah, like I said, sometimes people will make them moan just to kind of diffuse the tension of, boy, this, Geoff may be really upset at that. And then I'll moan or groan to relieve that tension or say something in a playful way to relieve that tension. So it's a really interesting article. Like I said, she's got a lot of other interesting stuff, too, about how people kind of non-verbally indicate when turns are over to kind of keep things moving and flowing, which doesn't always work, as we all know. Everyone's sitting around going, oh, it's my turn. But it's just been interesting. I've been diving into her research that she's doing this linguistic research specifically around board games. So I will include a link to her papers when this post. We'll get that up there so that you can go and check it out yourself. So hope that you think about it the next time that you hear somebody moan and groan at the table.
Oh, all right. Support for the Dice Tower comes from the Op, bringing you Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game. From the popular side-scrolling run-and-gun video game, Cuphead comes an all-new fast-action original cooperative dice game from the Op. In Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game, you work together to be quick and nimble to avoid the attacks and defeat the bosses to win. Roll to fill your move meter with jump, parry, and attack moves as you battle against familiar bosses, but hurry before the timer runs out. It includes 8 fan-favorite boss decks, custom dice, custom art, and more. Replay over and over again to try and beat your high score. It's a must-have for any Cuphead fan. Cuphead, the fast-rolling dice game, is available now at theop.games or your friendly local game store. And don't forget the promo code for Dice Tower listeners. You can get 10% off your entire purchase at theop.games. It's available for all games, puzzles, and accessories. Also, free shipping is available on purchases of $49 or more. Offer available for U.S. residents only. Enter the code DICETOWER at theop.games.
Often on our show, I get to talk about all the conventions I go to that Eric wishes he could go to.
This past year, yes.
Well, that has happened in the past. Again, you have a full-time job of being the most wanted audio reader in existence.
That is totally untrue, but okay, yes.
But in this case, I just did not have the time to go to PAX. And then when I looked at Facebook, I was like, looks like every content creator in existence was at PAX. But Eric and Geoff went to PAX, so I'm just going to shut up now and let them talk about it.
Sure. So I was there for the whole weekend. Geoff, you were only there for a day. I did promise to do sort of a travel log, so I did bring my recorder with me. So let's just kick things off with I have just got like 4 quick little segments checking in from various times in the con. We'll do that first. All right, we are here at PAX. It is Friday morning. I'm here with Matthew. We have just checked out the Isla Nublar, the Legend of Isla Nublar.
Yes.
Jurassic World game.
Yes.
So Matthew, I wanted to know, like, what surprised you the most about this legacy Jurassic World game?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect from it, but I think the thing that surprised me the most was just like the comic book style feel of the game, which was really cool to me. I loved that. I love comic books.
Yeah.
So when that was introduced and how like each adventure is going to be brought out in like a comic book, essentially, it was really cool to me.
It's the art style sort of stems from that comic book feel.
Yeah.
Even the rule book has like fake distressed edges.
Exactly,
it makes it look like it's this older product. I think they put a lot of care into the art design. I think I was impressed with that too.
Yeah. There was a lot of history behind it too, in terms of like, it was inspired by comic books, so we wanted to put it into the game.
Yeah.
And even the cards that come out and everything have like comic book art style. So I don't know. I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, I was impressed with how much stuff is in this box, because that's what people are going to ask for. This is a legacy game. It's coming to Kickstarter next year.
Yeah.
It has a $120 price tag, which is, I think, higher than any legacy game we've seen.
Right.
But there is a lot of stuff.
Yes, there's a lot of content, and they said that it will be replayable.
Yes, when you're all done.
When you're all done, you still have a game that you could continue to play.
I think we saw maybe 8 miniatures inside sealed boxes. There are 12 envelopes full of adventures, and those envelopes are thick with cardboard and new stuff.
For sure. They were heavy.
Yeah, you're basically developing the island, Isla Nublar, and making it safe for the dinosaurs and safe for the people, and building buildings and research labs.
Yeah.
And each of the buildings brings out sort of another mini board, which is sort of like Horrified. It reminded me of Horrified.
I was thinking the same thing.
Where you have, instead of a monster, here's the gift shop board, or here's the genetic sequencing board, and you can go to that place and do these actions.
Right.
And more of those are going to show up as the game continues.
Yeah.
That's about all we know, because all we saw was the basic setup.
Yeah, and that some people could become like better at certain things than others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the character sheets, the character boards have scratch-off segments on them.
And it actually comes with like a scratch-off tooth, which is cool.
There's a raptor claw that comes in the box
or a raptor claw,
that you can use to scratch off. Bonacor happened to crash our meeting, and he kept trying to steal the claw and scratch things off. And we're like, no, sir, please don't. So that's about all we know.
Yeah.
There is a lot. I'm excited to see more. I know Tom didn't want to know much more. He just wants to play it.
Yeah, I want to play it for sure.
I definitely do. Well, thanks, Matthew. Have a great show.
Yeah, you too.
And more from PAX coming up.
Woo.
All right, a little bit quieter out here in the hallway near the escalator. It is still Friday. It is Friday afternoon, and I've just had a chance to play the other game that I was very excited to get a look at here at PAX, and that is Jerry Hawthorne's upcoming Familiar Tales, in which you play one of 4 animal wizarding companions who are tasked with escorting a baby, at least at the beginning of the game, through a bunch of adventures. And so you are trying to avoid bad guys who are trying to capture this little girl, who I believe is a princess. And through the course of the game, she's going to grow up into a younger child and even a teenager in the later stages of the game over multiple missions and sessions as you work your way through this campaign. The game is a deck-building game, which is new for Jerry Hawthorne's storybook system. It uses that same storybook with the maps, and you're moving in locations and discovering items and fighting bad guys. But the system is now a deck-building game, where you are cooperatively working together and playing cards to attack and move and defend from effects and stuff like that. Unlike other versions of his system, all 4 characters are always in the game. If you are playing with fewer players, even playing solo, you basically combine all the characters into one deck and draw from those various special cards. So if I was playing with my 2 boys, I could have them each play a character, and I could play 2 characters, and I would just play with the combined deck, which is pretty cool. We only played through the tutorial scenario, so there's no spoilers here, really. In fact, we didn't even get through the tutorial. We really just went through the first map. The other big change is that there's full narration for all of the story elements. There's no story book. There's just the book of maps and zones that you're working your way through. The story elements come from an app where you enter in a code and it does like a fully voiced, multi-voiced narration sort of thing, which is really kind of fun. And it allows for lots of story elements and character voices and stuff like that. So I am excited to play through more of that. That's upcoming early next year. Obviously with shipping, they don't know when that's actually going to happen for real, but it should be early in the first couple of months of 2022. Familiar Tales. Now my appointments are done for the day and I can play some games. So, and probably eat. Eating is good. Eating is good. And more later. All right, yet again, another location upstairs at PAX, and well, it's Sunday morning. What happened to Saturday, you ask? I don't know. A vortex of everything. Got to play a lot of games on Saturday, which is good. I hadn't gotten to play a whole lot because I had meetings and demos and stuff like that, but got to play a bunch of stuff on Saturday. Got to play some classic, ridiculous games like 13 Dead End Drive and a game called The Inventions, which has the weirdest dice tower I've ever seen. But I also got to play, probably the biggest game I got to try was called Corrosion. This is from Capstone Games, that you're building an engine with a bunch of cool components that give you stuff, but most of those components are not going to last. You need gears that are going to rust, they corrode. You get machine parts that only last once or only trigger a certain number of times before you have to discard them. You've got sort of this wheel that you're putting these things on this wheel, and as it rotates, you will get them back or they'll destroy themselves as you go. You're using cards that have numbers on them. The more powerful the card is, the longer it takes to get them back. It's sort of a similar thing to Barrage, where you're getting your stuff back after a certain amount of time. You have to create sort of this cycle of getting more cards that represent people in your empire, getting more pieces of machinery to get more resources, and using those resources before they decay. And building components to your machine and hopefully earning points. I didn't do great, but it's an interesting system with a lot of stuff to manage, a lot of moving parts, almost literally, in Corrosion. Had a great time, but it's now Sunday, and I'm not quite sure what my favorite game of the show is. It wasn't Corrosion. I have another top contender that I think I'll get to with one more segment, probably on the ride home, because there's still a Sunday to do at PAX. More soon. All right, as promised, one more segment as we depart Philadelphia. It is Sunday afternoon, like 4 o'clock, and we are on our way back to Connecticut. But I'm here in the car with not just me, but I'm with Brian.
Hello.
And Kathy.
Hi.
And Brant.
Hello.
And we just wanted to answer one quick question. What is the best thing that you saw or experienced at PAX? Brian, why don't you go first?
I think from a new to me game, it would probably be Corrosion. I really enjoyed that from Capstone.
Mm-hmm. Kathy, how about you?
My favorite game that I played was the new version of The Crew.
The Mission Deep Sea?
Yes.
We went 10 for 10 on the first 10 missions.
Yes.
Which is pretty impressive, and now I can't play the game without the three of you as a team. Because it's just not going to go that well again. Excellent. And Brant?
My highlight was definitely playing the new expansion for Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I got a chance to play with Isaac Childress of Gloomhaven fame, which was super fun, and I think I came in dead last and still picked up a copy because it was excellent, and I loved it.
Excellent. I haven't had a chance to play the expansion for Arnak yet, but I did get a copy, so planning to get that to the table soon. I was going to, so this morning I had pretty much laid out that my pick of the con was going to be 1925 Cotton Club. And of course, when I say 1925, I mean 1923 Cotton Club, because obviously I knew that the whole time, and this is definitely not me recording this after the fact. which is the looping games. It's the latest in their number or the year series, whatever it is that you call that, about running a jazz club. You recruit performers and celebrities to your club and sort of improve the building and what you offer at this place. It's a resource management tableau building game. You're getting symbols to do cool things. But I just really liked it. Had a lot of cool decisions. But that is not my pick of the show, because this morning I played a card game called Scout. This was originally published by a Korean publisher. Oink Games is publishing it. I think copies are starting to flow out into the wild right now. But it is a ladder climbing game with some cool twists where if you can't play well, one, you can't rearrange your cards. And so you have to play sequences and pairs and triples that are already next to each other in your hand. But if you can't do that on a particular play, you scout one of the cards that are already on the table, making your hand better. And the cards are two-sided, so a 9 might have a 7 on the other end of it. So when you pick something up from the table, you can put it into your hand in either orientation. And you're trying to go out first, get rid of all of your cards. But it's very different from other ladder climbing games, because you're not winning tricks. Like we said, that you're used to having to play cards that are going to win you the trick so that you then get control of the next trick. But there's no single trick in this one. It's all one continuous hand as cards get removed and added, and they become stronger and weaker as the hand goes on. I really liked it. I'm going to hunt down an Oink copy immediately. Any other thoughts about the convention as a whole, folks?
I mean, it was great to get back into the swing of things after a long hiatus, right? So
yes,
that was just a ton of fun to see everyone and just kind of reconnect with all the different publishers and, you know, just people playing games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to see everybody. Got to see lots of Dice Tower people. Crystal was there.
Yes.
Matthew, Suze, but This Game is Broken crew. So that was just really fun to see lots of people that I hadn't seen in a long time.
Indeed. Well, that's it from our trip to PAX. It was a whirlwind for sure, but it's really great to be sort of back in the swing of things. And yes, as you can hear, it was noisy in a lot of spaces.
There were a lot of people there.
There were a lot of people there. Although I did feel like it was a well-managed mob. I didn't feel overwhelmed by the number of people, but it was a lot of people, and more people than I've interacted with in some time.
Yeah, for me, I'd actually gone to the Gathering of Friends in August. Was really the first convention I've gone to post-pandemic, and that only had about 200 people. So that had a very, very different feel. I don't know how many thousands of people were at PAX, but I went just on the Saturday, and it was crowded. But you're right. I mean, they kept the lines organized, pretty well. The exhibit area was pretty packed in, but other than that, it felt pretty open and airy.
Yeah, well, PAX has always been very good about crowd control. They seem to have their act together, and their organizational aspects about where they have people queuing and where they're directing traffic at various points. That's always been a strength of that convention, and so I think they were well equipped to handle the extra measures of keeping people more distanced. But yeah, you're right. When you got down to exhibit hall space, although I think they did something similar to Gen Con this year, where they spread things out a little bit. They did not have the hall full of booths. There was a lot more open room than in years past in between the individual booths. Yeah,
and for me it was, it was just nice to, I went kind of blitzed through the exhibit hall a little bit, but for me it was mainly to just see people that I haven't seen in a couple of years. So that was just the nice part of it. I got to meet up with you. I saw Crystal, but I saw a bunch of other company folks, Kurt Covert, Matt Loader, a whole bunch of people that either I haven't seen in a long time or made an arrangement to meet up with and meet face to face for the first time. So it was nice. I didn't play a ton of games, just being there for one day and wanting to meet a lot of people. But
sure,
that's it's been interesting as when I first started going to cons, back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, it was all about game, right? Play as many games as you can. And now over the last 10 years or so for me, it's like 80% seeing people and, grabbing a bite to eat or just socializing or whatever, and 20% playing games, and about 1% playing bad games from the 70s.
Yes. Well, I think part of that is because A, you get to play a lot more games, outside of cons.
Yeah.
And B, you went for a shorter period of time.
True.
Yeah, you had a lot of meetings to get through, which has me feeling quite honored that one of those 20% of actually playing games was with me and Crystal playing this game from the 70s called The Inventors, which was interesting to say the least, but had the most epic dice tower I've ever seen.
Oh, I know this game. When I was a kid,
Yep.
I saw it at the thrift store, and I wanted it because of that dice thing. It's the one where you press a button, right?
Yeah, and the dice
press
fall
a button
through,
and
and
it rings a bell.
Rings a bell, and the dice fall down. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to say that this is the impetus of the name of the dice tower. That may or may not be true because I don't really know. But I wanted that so bad. My mom said no, and I'm still annoyed about that.
Well, I know what to get you for your birthday.
Exactly. We'll have to track down a copy. The game's not great. But
No, I don't want the game. I just want that. I want that
the
little
dice tower
thing.
with the bell.
It's a cool thing, right? It'd be a neat thing to stick on a shelf.
Yeah. It also produces patents. Yes. So you get these inventions, and then you can stick the card into this machine, and you pull it out, and it's got a metal clip on it now, with a secret number that increases its payout when you turn in the invention for money. But it's supposed to work like a time clock. You go cha-chink, and it's got this metal clip attached to it. It didn't work as well as I wanted it to. Jeff got it to work really well. I could not get it to work for the life of me, no matter what I tried.
It's all in the wrist, Eric.
It's all in the wrist. But were there any other? You mentioned a couple at the top of the show, Jeff, that you got to play. Were there any designs in the Unpub room that you were excited about, or did you get to check up with any of your students, your game?
Yeah, I actually went into the Unpub room. I only got to play one game there, but it was with I saw one of my old students from the tabletop mentees, I guess, from the tabletop mentorship program. So I've mentored 6 or 8 or 9 people there, and she had developed this mermaid game, and we had worked on it, and it was probably like 6 months ago was the last time that I had spoken with her, and she was there with a new version, and so we played it, and she definitely made some more improvements. It was pretty cool. It's got sort of this multiplayer rock paper scissors tournament part of it, which you wouldn't expect in mermaids, but she did a nice job. It was fun, and I didn't play it. Well, I did play another prototype there, but just in general, I love walking through the Unpub rooms and just looking at the creativity there and what people are doing, and meetings and chatting with new and up and coming designers. I really enjoy that aspect of all cons that I go to.
Awesome. Well, hopefully PAX will become a template for more conventions in the coming year. I think they did a lot of things right, and hopefully they can, the other conventions on the horizon can take some of those lessons to heart.
All right, folks, I didn't want to belabor the best of 2021 top 10 list since there's so many of those have been done on the YouTube channel.
That's true.
I'm not kidding. I think I just started typing them out, and there's at least 15 of them or so. But
do you have you're putting together a master list on the website?
No, but we're reposting them outside. They were in the Winter Spectacular, but we're going to repost them as separate top 10 lists.
Right. Splitting them all up. Yep.
But I thought we could take a look at the year as a whole. Now, before we start, I want to ask Geoff this. This is a little going into GameTek a little. Every year at the end of the year, there's a pretty good chunk of people who tell me, either on social media or through email or other means, that it was a pretty bad year in general. And I cannot remember in the last 10 years when this did not happen. And clearly some of those years, for example, 2012, were phenomenal years. And I think part of it's because it's hard to judge something so soon to it happening. But is there some sort of phenomenon to this? Like people say, like the music today isn't as good as the music back in my day.
Well, I think there's a couple of things to that. I think it is primarily psychological in that it's selective recollection, right? Like we all say like 2012 was such a phenomenal year, right? And you ask people like name games from like even 2010 to 2012, right? Maybe people could come up with 10 games off the top of their head or something like that, right?
Right.
And if you ask people to come up with 10 good games from this year, they probably could do that. For people that are playing a lot of games, they'll come up with that. I mean, I think that the difference is basically that you forget about all of the games that, weren't those super top standout games, right? So you can easily recall those games and you don't remember the games. So since those are the only ones you remember from that year, all the games that year were good. Whereas this year, you remember the ones you played that were good and the ones I played that were maybe a little bit not as good and less forgettable. So it just kind of, is you see more of the warts. But as you get further away from the year, you only remember the good stuff. So you just you look at it through rose-colored glasses, I think, more, and you don't remember all the stuff that you played that just was forgettable, I guess by definition.
I also think that people get more jaded as time goes by. Your first year of gaming, everything is absolutely amazing and new. Your second year of gaming, you're like, oh, there's a lot of these worker placement games. Your third year, you're like, enough with the worker placement already.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of it also. Each person has their own journey through that. And then eventually you come out to the other side where I guess we all are, which is, there's stuff that, we know what we enjoy. It's nice to see innovation sometimes. Everything doesn't need to be super innovative. And, we can just kind of enjoy things for what they are.
I think also, at the end of a year, in December, there are tons of 2021 releases that I have not had a chance to play yet. And so you haven't really found all of your favorites yet. And so it's easy to say, well, I didn't really play anything I was really excited about because one of those 2021 releases hasn't hit your table yet.
And there's also just a lot of confusion over what games come out when.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will say, so I think when I look over the games that came out this year, I don't think there's a clear, this was the favorite of the year. Some years it's really easy to pick out, the Ticket to Ride, Race for the Galaxy, Dominion, Gloomhaven. There was not a game like that in 2021 that I can think of. The highest rated game on Board Game Geek is Sleeping Gods. Mm-hmm. And the second highest one is Cascadia. These are two very, very different games.
Yes.
They're both fairly popular. But, every year at the end of the year, I'm like, I wonder what game's going to win the Dice Tower Game of the Year. And sometimes I can just call it.
Yeah.
Some years I'm like, oh, yeah, it's going to be Root. I don't even know why But this year I can't. And it's not because I think there's no particular amazing game. I think a lot of great games came out. But there's no game that kind of just was the game of the year.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder if part of that is because of COVID. We have to talk about COVID. COVID affected this year tremendously. And there's not a lot of conventions. The conventions started up again in a more sort of a limited way. But conventions kind of drive, this game's popular and everyone's talking about it. And everyone talks about this game.
True. Yeah.
And also I think that there's so many games come out now, and since the preferred way of promoting games for board game publishers right now is through online ways, whether it's advertising, using content creators, etc. And so, depending on that, it could be some companies, their games might be more popular than other ones, and then a game might also have a very low release, like one of the games I just mentioned, Sleeping Gods, is just now getting to people who didn't get in on the first Kickstarter. And I can't tell you on these top 10 lists how many comments we got where people go, I wish I could buy some of these games. Well, that's not on me. That's on the shipping crisis.
Yes, which was a big theme for this year for sure.
It was a big theme. I mean, for me and the Kickstarter, it's affected me. It's affected me twice. It affected me it affected me in three ways. One, publishers were sending us promos, and so many promos got delayed from these publishers. Well, that's fair, reasonable. Then I got hit with shipping fees I never expected to pay when we got our stuff made in China to send over. And then now, as we're sending it out to people, those shipping costs are not the same shipping costs I charged people. And this is, and I'm, small fries compared to some of these publishers. And I've seen all of them complaining online, whether privately or publicly. They're all like, and I'm sure you guys have seen a little bit of this behind the scenes too.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and even my non-gaming business, so I have a product development and contract manufacturing business, and we do a lot of product manufacturing overseas, electronic products. And so we kind of got hit with the double whammy because we had all the shipping issues and all of that. And on top of that, the electronic component supply, which fortunately the board game industry has not had to deal with nearly as much, but to get there's so many components that have just been impossible to get or have just skyrocketed in price because you got to buy them on the secondary market from some shady guy standing on a street corner hawking microprocessors. That it's just
out of a trench coat.
It almost is literally like that. Yeah, we call it the gray market sellers and stuff like that. So it's tricky. We've paid $80 for what's usually a $4 chip just so we can get them to make parts for people. It's just been ludicrous. And then you get them on ships, and all the ships have issues too. So it's just been a horrendous year for that, and so that slowed things down, and it certainly creates frustration with the consumers out there, the people playing the games that want to get their hands on the games. It's frustrating for the publishers and the designers. We wanted to get the Super Skill Pinball was Ramp It Up was delayed by months past when it was supposed to arrive because of just delays in getting it shipped. So it's just hard because you're trying to get that momentum going, and and then on top of that you've got not only is it months and later than it was anticipated, which messed up all your marketing, but also it's cost way more. So literally 500% increases on freight prices. So it's not insignificant.
I think it's changed the emphasis. I got to spend some time with the folks from the Portal Gaming Store over the PAX weekend, and I think it's changed the emphasis of what they're focused on, away from upcoming new releases to what can I get right now? What can I get stock in? What do you have available that I can put on the shelf right away? Because if it's a game that's still a few months out, that could be 6 months out now, and not just 1 or 2. Because of this, the shipping delays, and everything is extended in its timeline. And so we're seeing a lot more emphasis on stuff that's in stock that may be a year or 2 old, but that can be promoted and sold right now.
Yeah, and the reality is that, unlike, 15 years ago when I first started, GameTek appearing on the Dice Tower, as I mentioned, right? Back then, games had a little more time to mature and get out and find their audience. And now there's so many games that you've got a very narrow window to make that impact. And if, you get a big flash and people say, oh, this game's awesome, we love it, it's great, and then people can't buy it until for another 3 months, it's hard to restart that engine. The next big thing has already come along.
So I think one of the big themes of this year is the redone, reworking, reprinting. So I don't know when I made up that silly Vassal's Law so many years ago. We talked about it.
Silly,
someone said, well, because I don't take it as seriously as some people do. Anyway, so what I said was, if a game is truly great, it will be reprinted.
Yep.
I had to make several caveats as time went by, like obviously not IP games where you can't get the IP, or if the designer refuses to allow it for whatever reason. There's a few minor things. But there was a geek list started on Board Game Geek of things that prove my law is wrong.
Yep.
Oh, God.
I really like that.
Okay.
I really like that geek list because if you go to it now, almost everything on it has been reprinted.
Yeah, it almost proves the law at this point.
That's funny.
And it's not really a law, folks. I know that. But this year, there was it's overwhelming. I was putting together a top 10 list of reprints and reworkings. I try to do this every year. I think it's an interesting thing to look at. And some years I'm kind of going, okay, well, I guess 10 will be the second edition of this game. This year I could have made, I think, a top 50. I mean, from the sequel to The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, to the Ares Expedition, the card game version of Terraforming Mars, to the redone version of Kemet, to Descent, 3rd edition, whatever they call it. It's still 3rd edition. To Dominant Species, a 2nd edition. Summoner Wars, 2nd edition. Zombicide had a 2nd edition. Railroad Inc. came out with 2 more colors. Unfathomable was the reprint of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
And I really could go on. Great Western Trail, the 2nd edition. Agropolis came out, which was a sequel to Sprawlopolis. Seven Wonders Architects was a spin-off of Seven Wonders itself. And this just keeps happening over and over and over.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning my daughter's game, but you could also throw mine in there too, just while you're doing it, Tom.
Would you like to tell people there's a Star Trek pinball coming now?
Oh, we can get to that later. No, but you're right. I mean, and I think that is a direct reaction to the volume of games that are out in the marketplace, right? If you're trying to cut through the clutter, Terraforming Mars has a name. The Zombicide has a name, right? People know what that is. And so it's easier to get an audience attracted. So yeah, I think same way if you were going to want to come out with another Spider-Man movie, right? And people know the property, know that IP, and companies are going to leverage to try to just cut through the underbrush.
Yeah, but it happens even more than that. We're talking about lots of old Kramer and Knizia.
Yeah, I just saw. I didn't realize
games.
there was an old Sid Saxon game. I think Buried Treasure, which was just re-released under a new version, right?
In a pie theme,
pie-themed version. Yeah,
it's crazy the amount of this that's being done, and I
wonder how much of that is from Restoration's success in that. I mean, they really kind of showed that hey, we can resurrect. We can rehabilitate these old titles and get people excited about them again.
That being said, Restoration is still the king in this department because they're literally taking these games and just really reworking them. In fact, today, as us recording this, I got the Dark Tower. Finally, Return to Dark Tower showed up.
Mine arrived today as well, yeah.
Nice.
That's a very different game.
Yes.
That was a little bit of humble bragging on our parts there. That's a very different game. And Fireball Island, very different game. And yet, that's not happening very often. Most of the companies are doing straight reprints with a lot of graphic upgrades and, tweaks on these sometimes, or they'll change the theme to pies or whatever. But to actually do a complete reworking doesn't happen nearly as often. And I think it kind of needs to. Because you'll notice someone will say, well, this game was by Reiner Knizia. Yes, but 90% of board gamers don't know who he is. So that's not enough, in my opinion.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. The market will speak on that, about whether these games do well enough to justify it. I mean, I would guess that they're certainly cheaper to develop. It's a good core, right? Like you said, people aren't really reworking them. So they're just, licensing it. Like people have forgotten about this. It's time to dust it off and put it out there again, give it a fresh coat of paint, and we're good to go. I don't have to spend a lot of time developing it or whatever.
Yeah, it's a known quantity.
I'm going to have to look into that sometime, though. Like when has a second edition, a reworking of a game, really brought a new spotlight on it? It's happened a few times. The biggest one is Netrunner.
Yeah.
Android Netrunner. Right. And I think you could argue Arkham Horror 2nd Edition was a pretty strong... I mean, most people barely touched the 1st edition. But for the most part, 2nd editions come and go. People are like, yes, finally they're reprinting this game. I've been begging for it. It's here and gone in a month. That reprint that you had so pleaded for.
Well, we sort of hit on this in our Games Ahead of Their Time segment, but Vinci and Small World.
Yep. That's an example of that too. That's a good top 10 list. I'll have to put that together sometime.
We did it.
No, not the games ahead of their time. I'm talking about the games where the 2nd edition caused a resurgence in popularity for the game.
Okay.
Downforce would be a good example.
Oh yeah.
So at the beginning of the year, I make random predictions. Well, they're not always random, but they're usually random. And I said in 2021, 6 of the top 10 ranked games on Board Game Geek would be Kickstarter. And it's actually 6 of the top 10. And it's actually 7 of the top 10 are Kickstarter.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I'll tell you. So it's Sleeping Gods, Kickstarter. Cascadia, Kickstarter. The Crew, Mission Deep Sea was number 3. That's not Kickstarter.
Yep.
Ankh, Kickstarter. Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition is Kickstarter. That's also the one that Jeff's daughter was involved with. Oath, Kickstarter. Destiny's Kickstarter. Canvas, Kickstarter. Cubito's not Kickstarter. Meadow, not Kickstarter.
That's the top 10 from this year.
Yeah.
Yes, the top 10 of 2021.
Interesting. And now we'll see, there's a little bit of uproar around Kickstarter, so we'll have to see what happens going forward with
That's
that.
true.
Which I guess was another kind of a little mini trend, I guess, was at least in the video games of people, these big companies starting to lean on NFTs and some of these other technologies, and some board game companies and Kickstarter mentioning that they might start dabbling with that as well.
And the backlash they're in.
That I don't think. Look, if that becomes a thing in 2022, so be it. But I don't think it's actually had any practical change in our industry in general. I don't think in 2021 at least. No Kickstarters have suffered because of it. No companies have seen loss of sales or whatever. That might change in 2022, but that sounds like a good prediction of my list I'm putting together.
There you go. Put it in the time capsule.
I mentioned Cascadia being the second highest ranked game. Cascadia was not only a game that was Kickstarted, but also showed up in Target. And I mentioned Target for those of you who aren't in America. I can't speak to the stores outside, but in America, especially let's say in my local game area, if I want to buy a game at the store, I have 2 good places, Barnes & Nobles and Target. But it's not just those stores. I'm seeing games show up everywhere. I was just at a, what's that store at Ross? Was it Ross? It was something like Ross's, right? I was looking for Christmas presents for people, and they had a board game section. They never have a board game section, or at least one that's of any value. And they had a bunch of trash in there, but they had Ticket to Rides.
Wow.
Yeah. But there was another game in front of the Ticket to Ride pile. And I was like, that's rude. So I put Ticket to Ride in front of all the other games.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that rearranges shelves in stores to bring the better stuff out to the front.
Yep.
Yeah, I was in a store or mall near us. It's called Indigo at a new store that I guess is a Canadian chain, but for some reason opened a place here in New Jersey, and they had a really sizable and nice board game collection. It was kind of comparable to, Target's stuff without, as much of the mass market. It was they even had like Root they were selling and stuff like that. So
wow.
They had a nice selection as well.
Kohl's is generally considered a clothing department store, clothing and housewares, but they do have a very small toy department. But over this past couple of months, they've added a lot more board games into their offerings. Mostly party games and very simple stuff, but some quality games. Yeah.
Eric's being very kind there. Kohl's is selling 99% trash, rubbish, garbage.
But more than they used to, which is my point.
That's true. And there was actually a few good games in there. I was like, wait, this game is here? It's all the trash. So yes, I couldn't hide all the bad games at Kohl's. There was too many. But I'll tell you what, this is unprecedented since the 80s, back when you could find Game Master games, Axis and Allies on the shelves at Toys R Us. There's so many games that are easy to find. I was at Target. I look at the games because I always do. I go to Target once every 3 weeks and check out the games. And I was there, and someone I knew from my church was there, and they were about to buy a game. And I wouldn't do this to a stranger, but to someone I knew, I went up and I was like, "That's
I'm picturing the slow motion with you just like flinging your body in front of the no.
And but because I said it was trash, and they're like, "Oh, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Here's like 6 games. These are all good games." This was for a young kid, so I was picking young kid games. Mm-hmm. But the one they had was some piece of plastic trash that I bought and play tested, and it was garbage. But I think it's neat that they have the option. I can't say, well, actually, you need to go online, to find a good game.
To find the good things, yes. Do you ever, loudly talk to yourself in front of the board game section at Target, hoping that someone will recognize you as an expert and ask for your advice on... sometimes I walk by the shelves and I'm like, oh, look, they got Ticket to Ride. Oh, they have the new new variant of Sagrada. That's pretty cool. Like hoping that somebody goes, oh, you seem to know what you're talking about. Could you help me out here? No one else does that?
No, it's not a bad strategy, though.
I try not to. It feels a little gauche. The most I'll do is I might occasionally, if someone picks up a game, I'll go, I like that game. You know, it's something to that effect. But I don't know. I wouldn't do, when I told the lady not to buy that game, it's because I knew who she was. Mm-hmm. I would not do that. I think that most people like slap them by the hands. Don't buy these games. You know, that seems problematic. But let's get back to 2021. So I mentioned earlier, events started happening. You just went to PAX, Gen Con, Essen, Origins, all went off, albeit
over like a 3-week period, right? It was insane.
Yeah, all in the same period of time.
It's funny. I talked to the publishers. They're exhausted. I'm like, you only worked for 3 or 4 months at conventions, but they felt it.
It was nonstop.
They had to go from one to the other. And then finding people, the shipping things compounding on that. That being said, I've heard nothing but good about PAX and Gen Con. Essen, I heard middling stuff, mostly good, but not all. And Origins was a mixed bag, but it's also Origins, so that's kind of the way I always hear about it.
The interesting thing I heard from all the publishers that I talked to, though, was that sales were just phenomenal at all these shows.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just pent-up demand or it was just issues because of shipping delays or whatever, but like nobody bought enough stock. I mean, everything was just flying off the shelves.
Yeah. I wonder, that does sort of make sense. Rather than hope to order it at home later on and not know if you can acquire it, when you get home, people were getting the games that they could get when they were at a convention. Oh, you have this in stock? I could get this right now? Okay, I'll pay the convention price to get this.
Yeah, but I think there was a feeling of hope. Okay, there's no question that this year has been a year of ups and downs, but it was a much more hopeful year than 2020. The fact that, I mean, I still see people like, I did my first in-gaming event in the first time. It's still happening for some people, right? And it's always this moment of joy. We realized how much we liked other people. Well, I mean, I that might sound cliche, but it is a big deal. Yeah, you know, and for people who are worried that online gaming is going to take over the world, its best shot was 2020. It didn't happen. We didn't all go, you know what? I don't need to go to conventions anymore. People still like getting together and playing games. So, professionally wise, Geoff, how was this year for you?
It was a pretty interesting year. So my Super Skill Pinball Ramp It Up released actually just about a month ago. Finally started hitting stores. So that's been a little bit of a longer road than anticipated, but I'm excited about that. And as you alluded to, just a couple of days ago, as of this recording, we announced the Star Trek version, which I've been working on for a while. So and I've been sitting on that secret for a while, which is very hard for me to keep secrets like that. So I'm glad that that's out. And some of the tables in there are super fantastic. So that's been fun. I've been working on some other game projects as well that I can't talk about yet. I did, for those who aren't aware, I did a game design software tool to help designers simulate different dice rolls and combinations and things like that, called McDie. MCDIE, which is freely available over on itch.io. If you just do a search on McDie dice tool or something like that,
Wait, is that what you used when me and Bonnick texted you in the middle of Gen Con because we were arguing about dice stats?
Yes, that is actually, yes.
Because we were both arguing. We were like, all right, fine. Geoff will know. We both trusted Geoff. We did not trust each other.
There you go. Well, I'm glad I'm here as a neutral arbiter. So that was a fun project. I also was pleased to be invited to be on the board of the Zenobia Award this past year, which was an put together by Harold Buchanan and Volko Runke to wargame designers to encourage less represented people from less represented communities to design games in simulation and kind of historical gaming spaces, which is even as worse than the traditional board game space in terms of underrepresentation. So, and just to see the designs that came out of that, if folks haven't had a chance to check it out, if you go to .org, I believe the site is. You can see the finalists, and I think some of them have already gotten picked up for publication. Just the breadth of different interesting topics was just phenomenal to see that and be able to help mentor people through that process was very special.
So we've had a couple of questions come into the show about this, but as an active working designer, you can probably answer it better. How has the current situation changed your playtesting and pitching process? Having to do all of it online, what tools have you been using to keep that process moving?
Well, the first thing is I've been, for whatever reason, I've been designing more solitary games, which makes it easier to play test. No, I mean, Tabletop Simulator has been a big help for sure. I think that's been a big lifeline for designers. But there's definitely deficiencies there that you don't get face to face. I mean, when you're playtesting, at least for me, one of the big things I get out of it is watching people's body language way more than talking to them afterwards. When you talk to people afterwards about what they understood or didn't understand or what they liked or didn't like, you don't always get a straight answer, or you don't always get an answer that's useful. But when you're watching people, if all of a sudden they take out their phone and they lean back and they look around, we talked earlier in the GameTek about non-vocal verbalization, and I think that watching people is just super critical, and you don't get that at all in digital playtesting. So it certainly has been challenging.
They're making the wrong kind of moan.
In terms of pitching, I think the publishers have adapted. My daughter takes she takes a ton of the pitches for Indie, Board and Card, and Stronghold, and they switched to an online model where you could just they were accepting emails from people, and then they would set up, again, digital demonstrations and stuff like that. So that's really helped publishers get through. And I think that's going to stick around because they can get through so many more. I think they'll fold in meeting people at trade shows, but I don't think they're just going to wait for the trade shows to meet people. If there's some interesting designs and they can view them digitally, I think people will do that.
All right. Well, overall, I would like to say I think the year was fantastic. We'll talk a little bit more in 2 episodes about the Dice Tower and a look back at that year and a look forward at the future year. But gaming-wise, I can't get everything played. There's just too much. There are good games I haven't been able to touch, and I'm learning to be content with that. There's just a lot of great games out there. I do still recommend to this breakneck cult of the future that we have running rampant across our hobby, and I still think that's not a good thing. I was looking at our 2 highest top 10 lists, our 2 highest videos in the Dice Tower. One was the best games of 2020 and the most anticipated games of 2021. And I'm glad people watch our video that much. That's fantastic. But play the games that are out there, folks. There's so many of them. So many. Don't worry about the future all the time. I can't wait for this game to come out. But while you're waiting, there's thousands of games. I say this all the time, and it's true. If they stop making games right now, never made another single game, I would never run out of games to play. Ever.
So maybe you need to do a top 10 list of games to play while you're waiting for the most anticipated games of 2022.
That's just my top 10 list, Eric. But anyway, any other thoughts on the year, guys, as a whole?
No, I mean, there's still tons of things I want to play, and that's always the fun of the first couple months of the next year.
Cult of the future. I just said, Eric. No, I'm kidding. Go.
Well, cult of the past, of the recent past. There we go. Stuff that trying to catch up on the buzz of things that folks are talking about that I haven't encountered yet at the table.
And Geoff?
No, I think it was for gaming, I think it was a good year overall. I mean, I think there was a lot of the issues that we talked about, but there's a lot of great games out there. A lot of these top games I haven't even had a chance to play yet. I really want to try Sleeping Gods and stuff like that. So I'm going to go back and try those, and I'm cautiously optimistic for 2022 that we'll get over the hump on the shipping and we'll start getting back to conventions. And, as you said, the heart of this hobby is sitting across a table and playing with people. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do that and have the game days at my house again and stuff like that we've all so sorely missed over the last several years.
Yes.
All righty, folks. Well, there you have it. That's 2021. Don't forget, if you're going to send in audio segments for our final show, send them to me at tom@dicetower.com because we want to start putting that together sooner rather than later. Because Eric loves, like editing at the last second. He told me it's his favorite thing.
That is not what I said.
Well, I can't say what you said because this is a family-friendly show. But anyhow, folks, thanks for listening. Geoff, thanks so much for coming on and joining us today.
Thank you, Tom. And actually, if I could just hijack a couple of minutes of your time here before we go, since this show is ending and I'm on here and I have a chance. You talked earlier about, when I first started doing GameTek, and our friendship actually goes back several years before that. For those that don't know, Tom was over in Korea for several years, and I was doing business over there, and one time, was listening to the show and was a fan, and just sent him an email randomly. It's like, hey, I've got a free evening. I'm going to be in Korea. Would you be open to getting together and play a game? And he and Joe, I guess at that point, actually came down to Seoul and met me at a board game cafe and played some games. Just some random stranger coming across the world. And after that, every time I went over there, we'd get together for some gaming up at his place, and it was, just really gracious of you to open and accept me like that. My family, I went over to Korea with my family a few years after that, and our kids got to hang out and meet each other and tour around Korea, which was terrific. And then you invited me to come on the show with the GameTek segment, and it's just really opened up so many doors for me over the year. When I look back on it, about the way it changed, since then, that turned me on to doing the game designs and to writing books on game design and being able to teach at NYU, and everything that I've done since then, mentor people and help other designers and come through and start scholarship programs and things that, it all, you were the catalyst for all of that. And, for me personally, as well as for so much of the industry. So, I just wanted to let you know that I really value our friendship and value the opportunity and really appreciate everything that you've done for me personally and for the industry. And I'm sure this is, I'm making it sound like you're riding off into the sunset. We're never going to see each other again. I'm sure we will see each other plenty of times. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to end the show to really express that publicly, and just let everybody know the admiration that I have for what you've done. So thanks for all of it.
Well, I really appreciate that. I remember the first time Geoff came, we played in this game cafe that was on like the 10th floor of this building.
Yes.
We met there, and then
we played Kalis. And Joe was very, very unhappy.
That's right. I remember that. You taught us Kalis because I hadn't played it. Or no, I don't remember who taught who. But the next time you came, we played StarCraft.
Yes.
Wow.
And we played it. That was the only game we played. And when it was done, you said, that was like a knife fight in a phone booth. And I thought, that's a great line. I'm going to use that. And I remember that. I was like, Jeff's so smart about games. So later on, when he went to bed, I was like, of course. It was just an easy call for me to make.
Hey.
Alrighty, folks. Well, thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon next week, Mandy, Suzanne, and then we're on after that. Lots of goodness coming your way. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And I'm Geoff Engelstein.
Have fun gaming.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 742 was recorded on December 23rd, 2021. Mandy and Suzanne are with you next week to kick off 2022, and in 2 weeks, Tom and I follow up on Mandy and Suzanne's Game Pie from last week with our own top 10 games from 2016. Support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Thank you for spreading the word. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. Find out more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with production assistance from Roy Kennedy, Mike Delisio, Chris Yee, and Rob Siri. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. Big reveal at a Philadelphia convention brought to you by PAX Premier. And hosting is provided by Game Nerds, your all-in-one solution for all your nerdy needs at GameNerdsWithAZ.com. We love feedback. Visit the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Email us at tom@DiceTower.com or eric@DiceTower.com, or follow us on Facebook. And of course, you can find more from the Dice Tower Network, including Tabletop Game Talk, Dukes of Dice, Board Games Insider, the D6 Generation, Solo BG, Ludology, and Dice Tower Now at DicetowerNetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. So is there a specific moan when it is somebody else's turn? Like if was that in the paper? Like what sound would that be?
I'll have to reach out to the author and see if I can get the audio recordings of that.
I know what it is. It's whose turn is it? You just say that.
Oh, it's mine.
You know whose turn it is. Whose turn is it?
It's a specific type of sigh when you're like to knock the person out of their stupor.
There you go.